like I have had a lot of anxiety, a lot of frustration, a lot of anger, a lot of stress. And my anxiety has been worse. I'm married and have a kid because my husband like leaves to go to work. And so there's been some anxiety about like him being a Black man. And I think even in the space of like being Eritrean and talking about like how we don't always see race the same way, especially if you're a more recent, person who's come from Eritrea to here. And so we have conversations all the time about race, and he's like, I'll be fine, like I'm Eritrean, like whatever. It's like, do you see yourself as Black or do you not? And I think another reflection for me has been around how do you have a conversation with a 6-year-old around like race and protests and racism, and we've tried to have that conversation since, for the last couple of years anyway, but it's really different conversation now that she has a different cognitive ability at 6. Like, right, 3 and 4, you have to talk about it differently. At 6, they get it. They start to pay attention to those things. And
I think one thing I've been reflecting on is like, I think there's a greater level of urgency from not just from Black people, but also like allies. People have been like speaking up, speaking to their communities and speaking to each other and their families, and they're also speaking up in the media.
A super common reaction of like Eritrean people, right, is like the it's not my fight. And I've been seeing lots of posts of like, hey, Eritrean, Ethiopian, whatever, right, immigrant kind of Africans, you wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the fight and the struggle of kind of the Black American, right, and everything that they went through. Like, we wouldn't have been able to come to America, at least as free people, right, if slavery and civil rights and all of those things didn't happen. So I think there is a privilege when you do come from a country that you know the history of, because you pay attention to that country's history more, that you don't have to pay attention to kind of the full context, right, of the story of Black Americans. And so you can get away with that, right? There's like a privilege in being a more recent kind of immigrant African than our Black brothers and sisters are.
I have been here like since I was a lot younger. And for a long time, it was always been, I'm Eritrean, I'm very proud of it. And there was a point of my life where it was like, are you Eritrean or are you Black? And it would be, my African-American friends would definitely be like, oh, you're definitely Eritrean, But then I always felt, for all intents and purposes, I am Black. I didn't have an identity crisis, but everybody felt like I did. And there was this narrative pushed on me like, no, but you're this, but you're that. And I would always be like, okay, whatever, But now we're getting to we're moving forward in a really cool way where you can be Black and you can still celebrate your culture. So, and I'm happy that we're moving in that direction. We're about to call people out.
Okay. Hey, you don't have to say their name. Don't say their name.
No, I'm talking about like, by people I meant our community.
Oh, yeah, but it's real. It's
anti-Blackness,
real,
right? I know, but it's like so many things we have to unlearn.
We're having this conversation also not to be pointing fingers, right? We're not pointing fingers at the Habesha community. We're part of it, and we're not like trying to diminish in any way of like our people.
And my mom was like, you're right. That is really wrong. And so for me, I guess my first thing that stands out to me, and sorry, I just hijacked that, was in our vocabulary, right? We use vocabulary that are really, really anti-Black, and we don't even realize it. Like when we say baria, like, to somebody, that literally translates to slave, right? Mm-hmm. And so when you say that to somebody, it's usually when you're referring to somebody that's like dark-skinned. Like, to describe anything negative is a synonym for Black, And that's, I think, a everyday way we practice anti-Blackness within our household, and we don't even realize it, And even when we describe something beautiful, we're like, oh, yeah, and then, oh no, is that and it's like very like, wow, like simply like you're telling me she's dark skin equals she's not beautiful, she's light skin equals beautiful.
I think even when sometimes our community or our parents like, right, will say like, oh, that Black person is like, they're talking about people who are not Eritrean or Ethiopian or even, right, like more recent like kind of immigrants, right, like descendants of slaves. And so they're always like, oh, those Black people are different from us. There's always this distinction. And so I think that's another way we perpetuate anti-Blackness. Our culture is always, and so I think even to your point of like, oh, you're Black, that like, yeah, if I was saying Black, my parents would be like, what are you talking about? Like, you're not Black, you're Eritrean. I'm like, no, we're also Black. Like, you can be both, and it took a while, I think, even for my parents to understand, like, you're both, right? Or if something was like Black Lives Matter, I might have been like, why would you say that? You're not Black. It's not about you. I'm like, it is about you. It's about me. Like, and their just
Yeah.
understanding of it is like that there is a separation. When they were first here, like who was going to teach them, right? Like how are they
Right.
going to have that dialogue and discussion? And they didn't hang out with Black people, but they didn't hang out with anybody. They only hang out with other Eritreans, right? Like it's not like because it was like a separation of Black people and them. It was everybody else except for other
Yeah.
Eritrean people or other immigrants or refugees who were in similar programs. I remember growing up in Arizona, all of the other refugees, because there were not that many Eritreans there, were Asian, but it was the like refugee Asians that my parents talked to, not like any Asian person they saw, because they were going through a process and a system together.
We don't give white supremacy enough credit. Like these mofos have gone deep, 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 deep. Like I'm talking about like internationally, everywhere I've gone, you guys. I like y'all know for what I do in my free time is I catch a flight and just go somewhere, explore a country, and I see white supremacy in every single country I've been to, and I've been to all the continents except Antarctica, and I've seen it. I was like, I love our people because in our homes we honor the hell out of one another. It's so dope, you know, especially Gasha. We almost do too much, honestly. We need to work on that. It's so tiring to Gasha. Oh my god. Like, can y'all just have tea?
All the moms just freaked out if you are there listening.
I know. They're like, why? But yeah, Gasha is too much. But I love that we do that, right? It's this thing we do for guests and it's beautiful. But it's like, why is that outside of our homes we honor and celebrate other groups, particularly white groups, before us?
How many Black friends do you have? Like, you know, like my aunt, if I was to go back, I'd ask my aunt, like, how many Black people do you know that you've actually spoken to and that you've had dialogue with, right? Versus believing stereotypes. And, you know, especially here in America, I'm like, you would be clumped in that same group, right? And so if the police saw you, they're not going to see you that you're Eritrean, they're going to see that you're Black, and it's the same thing. And so how would you want to be seen and how would you want people to perceive you in that space? But when you have no experience with Black people and everything you know is from TV and movies, like, it might not be your fault because you didn't realize like all of the messaging and images you saw and the stereotypes you have of Black people, but none of it is based on true fact or people you've actually engaged with. So how about make some friends and engage with those people and then we could talk. And I have lots of friends who are, you know, quote unquote Black and not Eritrean in your mind. And I can tell you what those people do and, you know, what kind of people they are. And they're exactly like Eritrean people. We got good people, we got bad people, we got foolish people, we got people who need help, right? We all have all of that in all of our communities. And there's no
absolutely. No, my dad, what? He's like, like, what's the problem? You go in. He's like, what, like, are you, like, what is this love you have imagine? I'm just like, and I sometimes I have to be harsh about it, the way I explain it. I feel like, imagine my little brother name is Daniel. He just graduated college about a little less than a year ago. And so he's like their little baby, right? He's the baby of the house. And I'm always like, imagine Daniel, this good, sweet kid you've raised who's so awesome, is driving and he gets stopped for a traffic stop. And then he's dead. They were like, Best mom, why did you say that? And my mom was like, what? Why would you say that? She was just like shocked. And I had to be brutal. I was like, that's how it is out here. Black moms are, every day, mom, Black moms are crying and screaming because their kids are being murdered for no reason all the time. And she was just like, I know, the Aduka, they're like this, I get it. But I literally, it got to the point where I had to make it personal for them to really get it. Because they're thinking this would never happen to us because we're law-abiding citizens. We're great. We're sinister atalana. We're not, like, it's always like, we're not, like, I'm like, first of all, I'm definitely dega. I be kicking it. Like, what are you talking about? I'm like, whoa. You know what I mean? I hang out. I have friends. I socialize. I travel. I socialize. You know what I mean? I was like, you see the narrative they built for Black folks versus white folks? It's like one is uplifting, the other one is just diminishing. And I was like, and when they say that narrative about Black folks that's so negative, I'm part of that. And that's why I'm fighting. And my dad was just like, huh, you're right. I'm like, yeah. And like, I feel like he's starting to relax his, I guess, perspectives and the stereotype that he's been fed for years. And I see real change and it's beautiful. My dad is the one who told me about Ahmad. I didn't even know. He was like, Rita, did you hear? And I was like, no, I haven't. I was avoiding social media. And I loved it that he was like passionate and called me about it and was like heartbroken. He was heartbroken about it. And my mom was like about to cry. I was like, it's sad to see, but it's good. Because it means like they care. It means they see their son in Ahmad, you know? And that like, I don't want to get much on it, but that like really warmed my heart. Because I was like, y'all need to see him like this. Because this is also your problem. Like, you know, it's like the way they neglect African Americans, it like hurts me so much.
Thank you for sharing, Ruta, making this personal.
So there's, I think, this other layer of complication that for Eritreans is not only did our parents, our family members go through 30 years of war, right, in back home, then they came here and they're so separated from their culture and their family and their community, and they want to make sure their kids keep some level of instilling their culture, that even when you say things like you're Black, like I know my dad used to say, like, it's disrespectful because in his mind you're negating all of, like you said earlier with that, right, all of who you are that's Eritrean, and that's not what you're doing, but in their mind, because they don't know any different, that's what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So
Absolutely.
then there's this other layer because of the cultural piece for us and for our parents, I think, where they don't want you to associate in any other way, because for them, then you lose all the culture, all the history. And for a lot of, like, you know, both my parents were in the war, you know, that's a lie. So both of them would feel like, what did I sacrifice my whole life and fight in a war and almost die and lose all of these family and friends for? Even when we're out there protesting, my dad's like, I left a whole other country and a whole war, so you didn't have to be fighting for something like this, right? And you're choosing, in his mind, I'm choosing to engage in that, versus it's not a choice. They're killing people who are me too. And they're not talking about their own trauma. Our generation who went through trauma in school, like, then you don't talk to your parents about it because they're not talking about their trauma, and you think you just have to do it and survive it or live it or move on or whatever. No one's really working through the talking. And I think that is a space in our community that's complicated, is we don't talk about anything that's bad or like, right, we don't want to talk about those things.
I've had a manager, y'all, and I was like, I think 18, and it was like my first like real job. And she was like, oh, I only hire East Africans because they're such a hard workers and just so great and just on time. And it was all these positive attributes, right? She was like, yeah. And it was almost like she's like, I don't hire, like, she saw me as Black, but she didn't see me as those Blacks. She saw me as a different Black. And I remember being like, hold up, you have the wrong one. I was like, what? She's like, no, sweetie, it's a compliment. I was like, no, it's not. What? They divide like the immigrants from the Black Americans here, and it happens all the time, and I hate it, and I hate it so much. And my parents almost like not my parents, I guess the community almost like celebrates it. And I literally said, oh my gosh, we're like white people, we really think we're better, like, you know what I mean? And it's this sick thing, and I don't know where it comes from, and I want to unlearn it, and I think I have to for the most part, but it's like I want to unlearn it for all of us, because it's wild, y'all.
They think there's a level of like that fear for them also drives some of that, either level wanting to assimilate or expectation to kind of be good, right? To like pay attention, don't cause a fuss, like be docile, like you said, Ruta. So I think that immigration fear just always, my dad always brings that up as like a last excuse for me to be quiet. It's like, yeah, you could get deported. I'm like, I have been in the US for over 30 something years. Like, what are you talking about? But he'll still be like stressed about like anything could happen to you. And I'm like, okay, and you know, I'll get a lawyer and call it good. Like, I mean, the stress isn't there the same way for me. Right. They really, that fear really drives them in worrying, right, about getting in trouble, and what obviously like what people think about us is really important in the Eritrean community. So like, what will people say if, especially in Ghana, she cannot go to jail. There's like not allowed, right? But then even on top of that, what will happen to you if you went and got deported? And so that fear, I think about like that fear really drives them a lot too.
Yes, thank you for making that clear, my point.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree anymore with that.
My dad is not navigating being Black in America, that he's Eritrean, true and true, and that's it, right? So I can't even ask you for help in the same way. And so I think for them to understand, just as some of you are struggling with your kids being like American, they are navigating their sense of identity of being Black or Eritrean or white or whatever they're thinking they are. They're going through that struggle, and how do you help your children through that space? In the same way that we have to talk about how you help think about for yourself, what does that mean then to tell your kid they're not Black? Like, that's hurtful, right? That's causing a lot of problems. So I think there's ways in educating that we can also tie to just like their children, right? That would be helpful understanding.
Both people need to learn and also engage with each other in dialogue, and which means I think to some extent we have to create spaces like this one and bigger ones for people to opt in, right? To opt in, listen, learn, pay attention, and be exposed to some new information. And I think that's like, it's almost like a campaign, right? Like there needs to be sort of a campaign to like create awareness to do this work. Even with the younger folks who are born here, sometimes they're nervous. Like they don't know how to engage in the conversation with their family members. And so they like just kind of retreat, nod their head or smile, walk away from the conversation, right? And so now is not the time to continue to do that. I think it's time to like start to be like, okay, how do I do this? A, and then how can I go in prepared? to have this conversation. And when it does come up, like how can I engage in a conversation with my family members in a way that's not gonna end up in me having to walk away like what I had to do. You know, because you're so worked up that you're like, you know,
Right.
passion and your anger shows up, and then you can't even like
Lose
they can't even learn,
focus.
they can't even learn anything from that, right? It's because they just like,
Right.
"Hey, what's wrong with her?" And it becomes about you.
Literally, I look crazy. Like, Dande? They literally try to assume what happened to me. Like, literally, all the too much to do. Did she work? What happened? I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm fine. You guys happened.
Exactly. Exactly. I like that. Yeah. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Buenos Latinos, like we can have fun and like just talk, you know what I mean? Like, and so
Right.
find ways that you already engage with your family, like whether it's coffee time or tea or going to Starbucks or like dinner or whatever, to just like start the dialogue. And even really simply like, you know, have you been watching the stuff with the protests? Like, what do you think's going on, right? And it to be a really simple question. And then you start to go from there of like having a discussion and then monitoring. I think Rosa says like you gotta monitor your own emotions and feelings too, right? And then be like, oh, this is getting too emotional for me. I gotta check myself and know when you need to step out. But if you just ask like one little question, you know, how parents could talk, like they'll just talk about all kinds of stuff, and so it'll get to, but you could just ask one little question.
Maadi, 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 maadi beteze.